We're just getting started.
Okay.
We're set.
All right. Perfect.
Great. Carly, do you want to relay the information from Curtis?
Oh, yes. So just so you know, Curtis has given his authority to share this meeting over to Kaylin. So we've got a nice text message from him doing that. So Kaylin will be our chair for the next little while.
Thank you, Carly. So I'll call this meeting of the ArcChart's Hotspot Regional Coordinating Committee to order at 1:05 p.m. today on the 30th of September. Summer, would you do a roll call, please?
Yep, we have Kaylin Jones, committee member and acting chair, Carly Castle, assistant city manager, Chuck Williams, city engineer, Corey Shirtliff, assistant planner, Jalen Hawks, committee member, John Nevstad with Fair and Piers, Karen Guzman-Newton, committee member, Mike Duncan, committee member, Robert Dow with UDOT, and Wes Shannon, committee member.
Thank you. First up is approval of minutes. We have two sets. I would entertain a motion.
I moved.
Go ahead, Mike. I'll second it.
I moved to approve the minutes for both the meeting on September 9th and on 20th, whatever the date was.
22nd.
22nd. Thank you so much. As they stand.
Thank you, Mike.
And I will second that.
Thank you, Jaylyn. Discussion?
Yes. Just on the second set of minutes, and it's not a big deal because I know we had a long discussion about it. Let me pull those up. The motion made by, at the bottom of page 2, motion made of the projects to be included. It's just so confusing to refer to the parking, dispersed parking as downtown improvements. So I'm just wondering why we still do that. Why isn't it dispersed parking plus Emma Boulevard instead of downtown improvements? Because that really makes it sound like we're considering things other than the parking, dispersed parking off of Main Street. That's my only comment. It doesn't, make or break the minutes. Just wanted to bring it up.
Thanks, Jaylyn. I think that's a good point. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Citizens to be heard. Have we had any submissions?
Yeah, so we got an email from I just forwarded it to you, Mr. Whitlock. I sent it to you as well as to Summer for the record. And it was regarding some questions about the design out in front of Moonflower. So I will actually also send it to Chuck because it might be useful. That was the only one.
Okay, so that's been forwarded to all of you, it looks like. Thank you. All right, discussion of dispersed parking projects, including off Main Street parking concept and in the Boulevard parking project. Chuck, it seems like you've been doing some work on this since our last meeting. Do you want to update us on where it stands now?
Yes, I will. Thank you. We've updated the cost estimates quite a bit. I'd like to share those with you. Hopefully they're a little bit more meaningful than the earlier ones. I'd like to share my screen now. Are you seeing a table 1?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So this was in the packet today, and this is a summary of the hotspot parking capital costs. It's not maintenance costs, it's just the summary. The detail sheets follow this. Emma Boulevard, et cetera, really is the Emma Boulevard system where we have which we looked at, I think was last meeting, And I can pull up that graphic if you'd like, but it has the parking lot, which has 16 parking spaces, Maxine, which has Maxine Avenue, which has 24 parking spaces potentially, and then Emma Boulevard itself, which would be connecting as a one-way street, has an additional 4 for a total of 44 stalls. And the cost for that Emma Boulevard system is $11,086 per stall. Those are pavement and curb and gutter and 6% green infrastructure or aesthetics and striping. So that's why those costs are lower than some of the other treatments in the downtown parking improvement area. And so if you'll recall, 2 meetings ago, we had a diagram that had, which were 7 streets. And then the committee asked us to looking at 200 north, just west of Main, and then 100 north, just east of 100 east. And all of the terminology gets to be a little bit confusing. It's on the graphics that is also attached to the packet. So I broke them down into the 7 street scenario and the 9 street scenario, for tracking. And then, as you can see, we still had the treatments of stamped concrete as one. At least we put together cost estimate for it, I guess is what I'm suggesting there. And that came out to be for the 109 stalls for the 7 streets, and the 144 stalls in the 9 streets. So for the just including the downtown dispersed downtown parking, be 39,891 for the 7 streets and 40 per stall, and then 46,982 per stall for the 9 streets. But as I got to thinking about it, and it's the committee's choice and UDOT's choice, but in my mind, when this all started, even the first go around, we're trying to help a parking system to improve in the community. And so I thought that it's a legitimate, if there's funding and if the committee, that's obviously your choice and council's choices, but I included the Emma Boulevard costs because it lowers the cost. So if you include this treatment and the Emma Boulevard system up there, that total gives us 153 new stalls at $31,607 per stall. Then I'd been asked to evaluate a couple of other options. So we looked at regular concrete, took the difference between a stamped and dyed concrete. And it comes out to be $35,000 per stall. And if you include Emma Boulevard, and it becomes $28,000 per stall. And then we did an evaluation of just doing asphalt with stripes and lighting and 6% for aesthetics. And that came for the 109 stall scenario, the 7 streets, to be $28,000 per stall if you just did those 7 streets. And Emma Boulevard, if you include that, it brings the cost down to $23,197 per stall. So that summary sheet was right at the beginning in your packet. Then I'd like to just, and I'd be happy to answer any questions on that, but I'd like to, these are the detailed cost estimates for Emma, and I won't belabor it, but there's the Maxine costs, the Minnie Lee Boulevard for Emma costs, and the Emma parking lot, 16 stalls, for the total of 44 stalls. Then these are the costs for the stamped concrete option with the 7 streets, 109 stalls, and next to it, the 9 streets are the 144 stalls with the bottom line costs and the price per stall underneath that. And we've done the same for all those treatments. I won't belabor those, but something that I haven't spoken with you before because we just generated it is a maintenance cost estimate. And this is best estimate based upon the number of lights that we're showing in the graphics. And again, the unit cost, what came from the 191 widening, a study that was done, And the spacing was based on essentially mimicking the Lancaster spacing, as well as it would fit sort of nicely um, in the median to potentially replace bollards. But that being said, it's an estimate. You know, any streetlights, whatever they would be, if they're added into the project, would clearly be dark sky compliant. And so our costs were based upon what the city currently pays for the streetlights in the city. We do that now for streetlights in the city. And so and I chose 50 years, which is about the life cycle for the concrete. Comes out to be 2.5 million, but the yearly cost is $50,000 per year. Regular concrete, about the same, $50,000 per year. Asphalt, there's electricity, striping, which we have to replace every 2 years. Chip seal, which is about every 10 years for parking. Miscellaneous, because again, we don't have this type of parking. It could be maintenance of landscaping, et cetera, for a total yearly cost of $57,000 for the maintenance. So it's not as much more based upon a 50-year design life cycle cost. And that is the new information, Kaylin, that I wanted to show the committee. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah. So Chuck, a question I've asked once before, I just want to clarify. I love the comparison chart, by the way, of all the different options. Thank you. Emma Boulevard, once again, at one time, UDOT said they'd be happy to pave, this is exclusive of hotspot funding, not sure how they were going to do it, but to pave the parking lot at Many Lee, but not so willing to pave the one at Maxine, nor the asphalt along the one-way street and farther south on Emma Boulevard. And it looks like you've prepared costs now for all of the above, which is great. It helps bring down the total cost per stall. I'm all for that. Would UDOT shirk at funding those kinds of costs because it doesn't meet their original criteria?
Well, I'm not going to speak for UDOT, Mike, but what I would say is the original hotspot funding, there was 1.7 million set aside of the 10 million total for the community. Set aside is what was called dispersed parking. Then there was the 8.3 million for the parking structure. Then there was $1 million, I got this right, set aside for the downtown improvements. So yeah, I believe UDOT has always been willing to, is this exhibit showing up now on your screen, by the way?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. This is the parking lot that I believe UDOT has previously agreed that yes, that would be legit for them. And I'm suggesting, and again, it's committee's decision, that really this is a one-way street in. If you went in here and parked and came out, this is all currently dirt. There's no drivable way to really get out of there down to here. And we city council held a workshop environment meeting in March, and with well attended by council members and neighbors and such. And at the end, I believe there was consensus and that this configuration of making Maxine a one-way street, which would tie into Emma Boulevard over here, and then Emma would go to a two-way street down here just past the Church of Christ, was acceptable and had that support at the time. So I'm suggesting that if what we're trying to do is address parking as a system in Moab, then I don't know if UDOT might not reconsider, again, if councils and the committee wanted this scenario, to see an increase of 44 stalls here in this northern side of town, which is not just in the downtown area. So sorry if that was too long of an answer for you, Mike, but there's quite the history to this and a lot of pieces to it. So
no, I remember all that, Chuck. Thank you. That's great, but that's not quite the question I asked. I just thought UDOT, while they might well be happy to pave Many Lee and the parking lot there, they were reluctant to go farther south because it didn't meet the criteria that had something to do with UDOT highways. It was more, they thought of it more as a local thoroughfare, and therefore any expenses involved in paving it was going to be the city's responsibility. Now, maybe they changed their mind on it and they'd pay for it out of this UDOT hotspot funding. That would be great. But I mean, your cost estimates are great. I'd love for them to pick up the whole $450,000. But I'm just wondering if they say, oh, we're only going to do the mini Lee part of it. And if you guys want the rest of it, it's all going to be yours. And then that would presumably bump the cost per parking stall number up a little bit. I hope that's not the case. I'm just curious as to how UDOT will deal with Maxine and the rest of Emma.
We gave them this information yesterday with
Yeah.
Monty on the subcommittee call, and I'm not sure that there was a clear answer. Maybe Kaylin or Karen has a different opinion than me on that. I had the impression that they were still looking at it.
Well, I sure hope so. It's a logical extension of everything else that we're doing. So I'm hoping they change their mind. I just hope they're not gonna, be an old stick in the mud, as it were. So, thank you.
And I'll just quickly comment that I have not had any discussions with Monty relative to any of this parking up at Emma. So I don't know what UDOT's current position is on that.
Thank you.
I know the city council is very familiar with this project. It might be worth explaining like the east side of Emma Boulevard up to the Hawk Light, because this is also it's hooking up to the bike path that UDOT is paying for off of the highway project. And so it's just that that multimodality that we're trying to, gain by having bike paths and accessibility for recreation use. So, and I don't know that anybody from the county council is familiar with this project as the city is.
So shall I quickly explain it, Karen?
Yeah,
Is that
that'd
what
be awesome.
Okay. Here's Highway 191, and there's a new Hawk Light it's actually in place now. It's not functional, but if you were to drive out there, across from the rock shop, which is over here, as part of the widening project, the city cost shared with UDOT to extend the shared use path down the east side of the highway from 500 West, where it ends today, and it'll come down to this Hawk signal. And then as part of the project, the city has paid, this is the shared use path, the gray here, to come down and connect. Right here is about where it ends right now, where we ended it when we did the 100 West project a couple of years back. So there will be continuity from the Colorado River Bike Trail all the way down the east side of 191, cross at the Hawk signal, and then down into through Emma into 100 West, all the way to the Mill Creek Parkway. And then what's not currently funded is this pavement scenario here, any of the pavement we're showing. And the green, by the way, is the green infrastructure we were talking about, whether it's a detention basin or gardens, that would remain to be determined in design. But then this scenario, which is what was approved by council, was a one-way road down through here. Does that help, Karen?
Yeah, I think it's helpful for others to know, just what the plan is with that, the bike path and with the Hawk Light and how that connection is happening with the downtown area.
That's right. Oh, and I might add that this would be a dead end right here. No access off of this parking lot. This becomes green infrastructure. That's what council approved also. But this, as you say, this is a multimodal system, that shared use path. Is this some type of a bicycle hub? Maybe. People could park their cars there and ride out to the river or wherever, or the arches for that matter, right? So.
Thanks, Chuck.
So the parking lot, the Mini Lee Ave, that's already funded, is that correct? Or fundable by hotspot money?
Previously the parking lot was approved as fundable by the dispersed parking. Yes, that's my belief, that UDOT said they would pay for this, but not for this.
Okay, so it's Emma that's in question, but the Maxine Avenue, that's fundable as well by hotspot funding?
I think that's the case you're making now. Previously, it wasn't. This came out of the workshop that was held in March, and I don't think it's presented to UDOT except in this, with this whole exhibit.
Okay,
But so that's why I broke it into three pieces, both in the stall count and on the cost estimates,
yeah,
because
okay.
three distinct pieces of one system, I would suggest.
So my other question to you, Chuck, and first of all, thank you. This is all so well laid out and organized, and it's easy to follow. Appreciate that. And my question is, I know last meeting we talked about the 25% contingency. Is 25% contingency included in those cost estimates?
Yes. Yes, it is. All of these, I'll just quickly show you one of the cost estimates. This is the asphalt for 7 streets. You go down to the bottom, the contingency is 25%.
Okay, yeah, I did see that 25, I just didn't tie it in. Oh, contingency, I was looking at LS, sorry. That's very clear as well, thank you. I don't know much about parking building and that kind of thing, but I have never heard of a 25% contingency cost. How is that reasonable? Does anybody else question that? I mean, it would be great if we could safely drop that to say 15% or even 10.
Well, if I may, Kaylin, answer that question.
Please.
Galen, the idea is that we've done what's called concept design. I mean, we've gone from our GIS system and done the best we could, but we haven't done things like go out and pothole utilities or take into account the actual depths, except what our GIS system tells us for utilities. And we haven't gone to final design, which is why, you know, I wouldn't show you good landscaping plans anyway, because I'm not a landscape architect, but at final design, we'd have good landscaping plans as well as good construction plans. So what's typical on engineering design is we might have 25% level plans here, maybe 30% level, could be, that could be discussed. And so what you do is you put a contingency on there because we haven't really had an opportunity to identify all the constraints. The other thing is, if this doesn't go to construction for 2 years, it's hard for me to crystal ball what exact construction costs will be in 2 years. And if the transportation committee, and I don't think I'm off base too much here, but if the transportation committee approved, assuming the committee approved it and it went to the transportation committee and they approved it in January, I wouldn't be surprised if the earliest this would be completed by would be the following January. So that's almost a year and a half out. So that's the nature of contingencies, is the unknowns that we haven't identified yet, as well as the moving target of construction costs into the future. So that's why we have it. And I've talked to some of my colleagues in other places for what's appropriate. It might be 20%, it might be 30%. I kind of came up with trying to reach agreement in the middle of 25%, but it's also part of the engineering judgment.
Okay, thank you, that makes sense.
Hey, Chuck, Kaylin, if I may ask Chuck another question.
Sure, I'm done, thank you.
Yes, please. That's what this time is for.
Okay, awesome. So Chuck, your previous cost estimate, like with the stamped concrete, the regular concrete, yes, that one. So I was able to see this yesterday, and I didn't get to ask you yesterday, but what is the difference between like if we added 9 streets, how come it came up so much higher? Like what?
Great question. And I asked myself that the first time I went through these numbers, and I went back through the numbers thinking I'd made an error. But the answer is, if I can switch, do you see this new, it says downtown parking project overview?
Yes.
The answer to that is, this is the 9 streets. So this is where we added 200 north, and you see that we got double median parking there. So median parking is the most expensive parking because it gets more treatment than just, even under the asphalt scenario, it gets some more treatment than just asphalt and paint. So we got 2 rows of parking there, which is good for good stalls. We also added 100 north, but because the width of curb to curb is narrower on 100 north, we only get 1 level tier of parking in there. If you see what I mean, we'd only be able to park in 1 car in the middle next to each other, as opposed to over here, you got nose to nose. Plus, under both scenarios, we do striping on 100 east, restriping those to improve the parking situation. And it's kind of a dilution factor, if you will, under both scenarios. This paint, just paint, helps lower the cost, but under the adding the 2 streets, we don't get much bang for the buck here because we're only getting 1 tier in those median parking costs. And this is median parking, which is the most expensive part. So hopefully that makes sense to you. We added 2 streets that were the most expensive type of addition treatment.
So would it be, I mean, would this be something that we, as a committee, we could be like, oh, well, that's not, it doesn't seem like we're going to get a lot off of, the parking in front of the mark. So not include, I mean, do you have those broken out? Like where if we took that one out and just kept the other one, that would still, like we have a number?
That's what the 7 streets and the 9 streets is.
No. Like, let's say we did 8 streets instead of 9.
Oh, I'd have to calculate it, but we could get that done. I don't have that one done right now for you, just because, we had done the 7 streets, which was our original scope, and then committee asked us to do the 9, but we could certainly do it, break that up.
Because that 8th, let's say the one, I'm sorry, is it 200? That has the double parking?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, how many spots is that?
That is, you'll just give me a second on.
Sorry, Chuck, I don't mean to put you on the spot. I was just curious if we.
No, I don't mind if you, just, I want to be exact. I don't want to, I go by memory sometimes and I usually get in trouble. West 200 North picks up 19 spaces from the current condition.
Okay, and then 100 only picked up 9 spaces, or did it even pick up any?
West 100 North, it would be East 100 North. I think I got these backwards. Southeast. Convert to median parking 2 row, 1 row. 16, 10. It picks up 10.
Okay. So, I mean, I'm just wondering if it would be worth having a discussion to, potentially pick up the 19 and drop the 10, because it seems it's expensive and we're only getting a single layer of parking.
Yeah.
So.
Wait, the second block of East 100 North picks up 16, it looks like. It's the first block, which is 10, but part of that is the conversion of the parking in front of Moonflower to a loading zone, which was what the public comment addressed as well. So just if I'm understanding that correctly.
Oh, yeah, I mean, so Caitlin, I was just saying that whatever that parking is that seem to be more expensive, and I'm talking about in front of the mark. I don't know.
Right, but well, I'm saying that it appears that that street picks up, that block picks up 16, and it's the block in front of the 0 to 100 east on 100 north that only picks up 10.
Right here, you're correct, Kalen.
But if we used a reservable loading zone, we might be able to
Yeah.
bring that up.
Why can't our streets be named real names? Darn it.
I know. Yeah,
Okay.
I renamed them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
No, I'm telling you, I like Magnolia and Sunset and okay, so Chuck, the parking in front of the mark picks up, so that 8th and 9th addition that you added to the scenario.
Yes.
Is that, am I?
It picks up 16 spaces there. That's right. When we went from 7 streets to 9 streets, we went from 109 spaces, if I recall, to 144.
Okay, so that one block in front of the mark picks up 16 spots.
Correct.
And then the other block of 200 picked up 19.
19, correct.
Okay.
So,
Hey,
so
Chuck.
Chuck,
Hey Chuck, can I share my screen briefly? I want to show folks something. So I just want to give you some context for how I am starting to think about this, which is not these projects in isolation, but more looking at a package where we're aiming for around $10 million total. And because if we want to focus on dispersed parking in the city, we could potentially ask for it all. If we want to have money left, but depending on how much we want to have left over for other projects, that might constrain us. So I've packaged it up as 3 options, but it seems like that's very preliminary. With on the left, starting with 7 streets of dispersed parking with asphalt plus the Emma area. And then that allows us to potentially fully fund the Spanish Valley Trail and the shuttle transit pilot, and account for the sunk costs of the downtown parking structure design. And then over on the right side, going more all in on dispersed parking, but then that requires compromises with the other projects. So I just wanted to point that out because it seems like there's, in a very short period of time, we're going to need to identify a whole package that we want to ask UDOT for funding for. And also some of these, and then there may be strategy questions. It seems like over the last 4 or 5 months, UDOT has given us some guidance about how they might score this, but it may be a negotiation as well. And so we might just have to make calls about what we think is fundable versus what we want. And that's subjective. And another thing that occurs to me is that with these, the +2 streets that Chuck has shown us drawings for, there aren't places for driveways that access these streets won't be able to cross potentially. So there's potentially political issues for us as well if we go for that level of, that number of stalls in the median. So just wanted to point all that out. Sorry, I think Mike, was it you who was about to say something else?
yeah, I started to, and now Kalen, I don't even remember what it was I was going to say. So
Oh.
go on, thank you.
Any other questions or discussions on this topic?
Well, let me just throw in my same concern, I guess you'd call it. I mean, the shared use path and so forth, and and for that matter, operational funding for the transit and so forth. I mean, I hope that flies. I love the idea. It's just, I mean, from time to time, Monty is, as you know, you know how he is. He's never definite about anything, but he offers handwriting on the wall, as it were, about, well, the shared use path, I'm not sure if that meets the original hotspot funding objectives and blah, 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 blah. So, so I mean, I love your three options, Kalen, A, B, and C, because you betcha real quick, we're going to have to decide what the complete package looks like. And it's kind of scary to me that we're not really sure what UDOT will actually sign up. Now, there may be money in the $8 or $10 million we got left to send, but I'm concerned that Monty will say, well, it doesn't really meet the criteria. And that kind of changes the ballgame, but I don't know what to do about it right now. Thank you.
Well, in my conversations with staff, I'm encouraging them to come up with studies, if you will, or other documentation that multimodal path has a good likelihood of taking away from trips downtown and thereby reducing congestion, shifting transportation choices from private vehicles to bikes, e-bikes, and so forth. So I think the ball is still in our court to decide what we want and then like come up with an argument for it. Karen.
Karen, I thank you very much for being very direct with potential cost estimates for each of the projects and sort of the give and take. I mean, because, you know, it's interesting. You could ask the public, you know, what they want, but there's always a compromise. So I liked your groupings, and I feel like, again, like this group, it seems like we're pretty much, and I not to get ahead of it, but I mean, again, I'm so concerned with the 26 days until we have to present this on November 1st, that do we have our three concepts? Can we say yes, that these are our three concepts, and then just keep working on them and present those to the commission? I mean, is that, I mean, I don't, you know, we spend a lot of time trying to go through talking about design and there's still going to be a place for that. So, you know, in my mind, I'm like, of course, I'm all in for transit. I'm all in for the dispersed parking. And if there's money left over, I want, you know, the multimodal path. But I mean, where are we as a group? I mean, can we just say this today? Like, this is the three that we're going for, and we present them and see what the commission says to us? I mean, how's everybody else feeling?
Well, this wasn't noticed as an action item, and we're missing two of the county council. So I'm reluctant to make a final determination yet, but as long as we, I mean, I guess we do have a quorum here, so we have a majority. So if we wanted to rule something out, otherwise I'm under the impression that staff is going to be working on like a first draft of proposals that would be submitted to UDOT for us to review. Carly and Chuck, am I understanding the work process correctly?
Yeah, so there are several different ways we can do it. I think what we had in mind, definitely I want to make sure I get my dates right here. So let me like exit full screen and look at my calendar. As you recall, we'll just go over the kind of rough timeline again, because it keeps changing. So we want to have some sort of final package to a joint council and commission meeting the week of October 26th. So you're right, Karen. I appreciate your eagerness to get this done because we're running short on time. Meaning at the latest, I would like this committee to have their final recommendation finished by the week of October 19th. We are also, keep in mind, doing public engagement throughout this, so that is not yet complete. but it will be done by the week of the 19th. So you will have that information to review before making your final recommendation. We can meet again next week, the week of October 5th. Also the week after that, the week of October 12th. So what I would love to hear from this committee is what they feel, what you feel you need in the next 2 weeks to finalize these concepts. I really think the table that Kaylin put together is really helpful because it sort of spells out different iterations of your options. And I see us, like, you choosing one of those and forwarding that to UDOT for their consideration. It's also quite possible, I mean, near the end of this, when we make a recommendation, you know, the county council, the county commission, and the city council, that UDOT comes back and wants to negotiate a bit. It doesn't necessarily have to be cooked November 1st. That's the one we're locked into, you know, no more discussion about it. It may be that UDOT does it, they look through the numbers and they're like, you know, we found more money, we found less money, we don't think this is going to cost what it's going to cost, or there might be that kind of flexibility. So I appreciate, Mike, what you said too. We're kind of trying to hit this target and we don't know where it is. And I think it will be more concrete as we start to finalize a proposal and, you know, present it to UDOT. UDOT kind of looks at it and has something to react to. And that way we can sort of start to refine it and get closer to that goal, whatever it is. So it may be iterative in these next couple weeks.
Thanks, Carly. And are you anticipating that the council and the commission may approve it at a joint meeting?
Yes, a joint meeting. I think that would be best, just so you all can have the same conversation. It's more efficient. Yeah.
Okay. Just because of people's schedules, it might be nice to start actively scheduling that.
Yeah, I can start scheduling that this week with county staff.
And I think an important part of this is is the next agenda topic, which is hearing about the shuttle and transit pilot, because we haven't really, even though we've talked about it, we haven't heard the specifics. And so now that we're getting some more, the path forward on that is getting clearer. I think that could help inform this clarification of our preferred package as well.
Hey, Kaylin, can I?
Of course.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of throw some stuff out there to the committee. It just almost feels like we're going backwards at this point. I don't know if everybody has that feeling, but it seemed like we were narrowing all this down coming in for a landing, and now we're kind of spread out again. I'm a little bit scared of spreading ourselves thin with all the projects and under delivering on the dispersed parking downtown. So, I mean, I guess I would just encourage everybody to, if we can nail down something and stick to it, seems like it'd be a better approach as we get closer to the deadline. And one thing that I was going to mention last meeting, but I didn't, we keep comparing the stall costs to the parking structure. And it just feels like it feels like a bad comparison. I don't know why we're locked into that, why we have to go off that stall count price. It seems like the benefits far outweigh that stall price. Once the whole thing is done, you know, the whole downtown area with the parking design that we have laid out is just going to be far more beneficial to everybody downtown. So, and then just as far as the bike path, I've said this before. I mean, I'm a cyclist. The bike path sounds like an awesome idea, but I think if we could focus on the dispersed parking, and then now with this new transit in place, for me, it feels like if we could focus on those two things, it would definitely check all the boxes for UDOT. So yeah, that's all I wanted to throw out there.
Thanks. Karen?
Yeah, I'd like to, Wes, thanks for bringing that up because it really has been a point of information for UDOT that, in UDOT's eyes, one of the biggest, what do you call it? Not complaints, but criticisms of the downtown parking structure was the cost per stall. And I think there's some nuance lost in the fact that that was just for like one structure in one certain section of town, and it wasn't necessarily equitable for all the businesses in town for parking. And so the dispersed parking is it isn't apples to apples. It really is an apples to oranges comparison, because this is a downtown improvement for all of business and commerce in the downtown area. So I thank you for bringing that up, because that is, I think you're spot on with that.
Right, and I agree that there's economic development benefits from the dispersed parking that are not captured in the just a pure parking analysis. This is part of why I want to get it going on the formal proposal, and for this committee to have a chance to vet it, because I feel like that's an important place where we really develop and hone our arguments to UDOT about these points. Seems like we've been making them to ourselves, and UDOT staff may be present at our meetings, but despite us bringing up these points repeatedly, I'm not sure that if we're getting productive feedback, or if we're making the arguments to the right people. So,
Mr.
Yes,
yeah,
Mike.
Mr. Chair. Yeah, my 2 bits worth, looking again at Chuck's chart and kind of echoing Wes's sentiments and so forth. Maybe it's my long engineering career and knowing how well everything that can go wrong will. I'd rather err on the side of caution. So, if I had to choose now, my vote anyway would be, and I know you and Karen feel a little bit differently, and that's okay. I would go for the asphalt with Emma Boulevard, the 7th Street option. That's the cheapest total price, $3.5 million, and a pretty cheap maintenance cost per stall, $23,000 per stall. And Chuck, I was interested because the extra maintenance cost for asphalt as compared to concrete wasn't as large as I thought it would be. I thought you said $7,000, if I got that right. And to me, that's all not quite down in the mud, but it's getting there. So maybe that's something we could swing. And anyway, that's what I would do, and that would leave some more money for the pilot transit project, and maybe even be able to swing something out there for the shared use path, which is a great idea as well. So, that's kind of would be my favorite at this moment, for what it's worth.
Right, and Mike, that under that's my option A, and option A, B, C are not hierarchical in my mind. They're just letters. But as I understand the cost, those could all be fully funded within the 10 million. So here's the basically 3.5, 4.2, and 1.5 comes in actually significantly under 10 million. So here's one perverse thing, is that if UDOT is considering landscaping and other things, aesthetic improvements, and limiting us on a percentage basis for the whole project costs, we're incentivized to choose a more expensive, as expensive a parking option as we think we can get away with, so that we have the leeway to do the other things that they don't value as much. So I think that's something that, as part of our package, we should point out, and that ultimately what matters is, like, if what they care about is the cost per stall and coming in at less than the parking structure, we can say, yes, we're doing that, and we're delivering these other economic development benefits, and it may not meet this typical maximum percentage of aesthetic improvements, but this is a hotspot project, not a pure transportation project, which has broader goals. If we're arguing for different packages, I would be inclined to go for the concrete, not because I feel like concrete is necessarily my preferred material, or that it's the highest priority aesthetic treatment, but because I think that if we go with asphalt, we should have some overhead for planters, which may involve more concrete curbing, and other reinforcement, as well as the irrigation and soil medium, as well as the plant materials. All that will add up. And so I feel like budgeting a little bit more than the bare bones parking will give us the overhead to do the aesthetics that we will work out in final design. Karen.
So the O&M, I mean, that is, I mean, I don't want to ignore that. And, you know, like when you look at the 50-year history, I mean, I'll be dead, but I'm just curious if, you know, we have sustainability goals, could we do something with, you know, solar lighting? Because that was the bulk, $40,000 a year for, you know, the lighting costs. I mean, our electricity cost for the city is out. I mean, it's heartbreaking to see when you have to pay those bills, because they're really, really high. And so if there is a way that we could do something cool with lighting and it isn't $40,000 a year, that I just would like to throw that in. And I don't know what the cost for that, you know, if the difference, you know, can you get them for $10,000 a piece, or is it less or more? I don't know, but I'm just saying, like, if there's ways to keep our costs down over time, that is just an added benefit.
Thanks.
So Kaylin, can we get a copy of that wonderful comparison chart you made?
Of course.
That's great. And then I'm sorry, I missed probably the last 10 minutes of this conversation because I had to take a call. But I will just say, in the bits and pieces that I heard, I want to say that I'm all in on the parking. I also think that no one project stands on its own. I do think that all three projects together complement each other. And unless you live near Spanish Valley Drive and take that every day, you may not understand the necessity to make improvements. I mean, it is definitely a shared pathway right now, both for tourists and locals. And I think that we can make the case to UDOT that it's necessary. I mean, if we're already sharing it. That's the way I go back and forth to town, because it's just way more calming for me than taking 191. And there just frankly is not room for everybody on that path. And so we come with a shovel-ready project with a budget already complete, and I think it actually complements and enhances the other two projects that we're talking about. So I just hope that we can make that case. The other thing I would say about the shuttle, I am just a little bit concerned. I am all in on that. I want it to be successful, but I do hope that the people that we want to use it will actually use it. And then I wonder also, are we subsidizing something that the hotels should be taking care of? I don't know. I mean, those thoughts just run through my mind. But again, I think we can make the case for all three projects to greatly enhance one another, because any one all by itself does not quite do the trick. Thank you.
Karen.
So I'm sorry. So just to transit. So Jaylene, we are going to have a discussion as to, you know, what we would be willing to do as a city and a county to meet. I mean, UDOT is looking at that we have some skin in the game. So they are saying, okay, you guys can do a 3 to 4 year pilot program, and it's going to, you know, cost $500,000 a year. I mean, we can cover that in this hotspot funding, but you guys have to come up with something. So, I've been asked, like, I've asked those questions, like, so is it the use of Spanish Trail Arena? Is it the fact that there's a staff who, there was some discussion with the consultants that there has to be a staff person, and if it's a quarter time amount of that employee's energy to oversee it, because we're hoping that it gets contracted out, but somebody has to oversee that it is functioning. How much time that is it 5 hours? Is it 10? I mean, we're not sure. So we're also trying to figure out what our skin is, basically, and is it a private public relationship with the hotels, and we get to use their parking lots for people to jump on the transit outside of hotel customers. I mean, there's all those discussions do have to happen, and in terms of us subsidizing it, I'd like to just make very clear that, especially for the city, I mean, in the county, our sales tax is, I mean, like our city runs off of our sales tax funds. So if people are spending money here, then I don't think that we're subsidizing something, because they're actually a benefit to us for sure. I mean, I just would like to point out that tourism is our bread and butter for us functioning. So as it is yet now, but when we get more economically diverse, then people can do other jobs, that's fantastic. But as it is right now, that's where we're at, so just like to say that.
So this is a really good discussion. And the next item is specifically on the shuttle transit concept. And I'm wondering if now would be a good time to transition to that, because this is relatively, Carly.
Well, so before we do, I just want to make sure I understand the lesson from this committee when it comes to the off Main Street parking and dispersed parking option. What work would you like us to do before we meet again to help you make a decision, I guess a preliminary decision about which scenario you would like us to finalize for your approval? So my suggestion is you meet again in 2 weeks and we start to put the package together. So there's a draft package for you to tentatively approve, and then you will vote at another meeting on a final package. Do you want, that really helpful table that Kaylin put together? Would you like a package for each of those? For more than those, for just one? What do you have in mind?
My main, let's see. I think there's some parts of the package that are going to be shared, and those may be arguments about the value of economic development components that UDOT thinks of as aesthetic, but we think of differently. I think one of the concerns that I've had is being clear that we're not locking in, even though we're presenting, at core, what we're presenting is a suggested amount, a potential stall count, and a cost per stall. And then my understanding is that, like, we're going to sort of rehash the design with a consultant in the future if we're funded. So part of this is just figuring out, like, how many streets and how much we want to spend on it. Which is I think if we're trying to stay under 10 million is a trade-off with potentially with other projects. So
is there any,
Karen?
Well, I was going to say, can we make that decision, like give you like send you an email after this, like, so we can ruminate on this a little bit more? I mean, or do you need this right now?
We're narrowing down an option. We probably want it done in the public meeting. And We can also try to meet again next week. And then in 2 weeks, to have this discussion. And then in 2 weeks, have a draft for approval. And then in 3 weeks, the vote on the final draft. But that was the purpose of this discussion item, was so we could start narrowing and developing that draft concept plan, the package. And if you would like to meet again next week, how can we help you facilitate that discussion? We can also ask Curtis when he is back to, as he drives the discussion, but is there anything that this committee would like to see for it? If that is the option you go with.
I would personally, I would like to know the cost for the 8th and 9th street.
Okay.
If that makes sense. If I could have that broken down, that'd be awesome.
Which street do you want to be the 8th? Or do you want both of them?
Oh, I think the 200 as the 8th.
200 is the 8th, and we get rid of that for that extra one on First North, right? Yes.
Darn it. On Sunset, yes. On Mark Boulevard. Yep.
The single to go. Got it. We can prepare that.
But that's just me, Carly. I mean, I don't, that's.
I think that's worth checking out. I don't think that's too much of a lift. It's informative. That's not a problem.
I'll jump in, Carly, Kaylin. Yeah, I mean, for me, it seems like just focusing on the Emma Boulevard and the downtown dispersed parking as a whole package,
Okay.
without any restrictions, really. I guess from my point of view, it's like go all in on the downtown parking, which Chuck came up with those numbers, and there would still be money left over for other projects. So I think you just slide it over the table as a whole package with Emma Boulevard and downtown dispersed parking with the maximum amount of stalls is kind of where I'm at.
So like the 9th Street, and you want it the stamped concrete?
Yeah. With with all the landscaping in there and everything. So.
And I'll just jump, since we're doing specifics, I'll just jump in with like what I have identified as option B: 7 streets, plain concrete, the whole Emma area, most of the Spanish Valley Trail, and the shuttle transit pilot, and acknowledge that we have sunk costs, that UDOT money on the downtown parking structure design, and that's money that we've spent and it should come out of our budget, even if we don't pay it directly, which I don't want to do. Sorry, Karen.
Oh, I was just going to say that and I was trying to figure this out. I'm looking at the graph right now, but we figured there was only a $492,000 difference between stamped concrete and regular concrete.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just to throw that out there and Chuck, can you correct me? Was that for the 9 streets? I'm trying to do quick math. No, I think it might just be for the 7th, but that it was a
7.
It was a minimal difference for stamp compared to just regular, but that just throwing that there.
It's 5% of the total package. Yes. Jaylyn, do you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah. I actually like the stamped concrete just because it clearly delineates where people are supposed to be parking. So I like that. And I was going to ask you, Kaylin, can you put your chart back up on the screen so we can look at that again?
Sure.
Or else email it and I'll put it up on my own screen. And so you're advocating for option B, Kaylin?
Yes.
Okay.
In part because I feel like it accomplishes most of what we want to do downtown, but I think there's also value in the Spanish Valley Trail, as well as transit.
Yeah. I mean, at the risk of getting less of Spanish Valley funded, I would still say let's do stamped concrete on 7 streets. That would be my choice, but of course it's up to the committee to make the recommendation to UDOT. So it's not something I would fall on a sword over.
Does that include Emma Boulevard too?
Yes,
Okay.
option B, Emma Boulevard.
Okay. And so 7th Street, so that is the option C. Oh wait, C, right? Except that one has 2 streets asphalt.
Well, that was my attempt to like try to get the functionality of the additional parking, but maybe not go all in on the aesthetic treatments for those further out streets and save a little money there.
So it's like a modified option C.
So Kaylin, question for you.
Yeah.
So all your A, B, and C here are all about $10 million with the downtown parking structure fiasco and so forth. And I know there was some money expended for design that went out the window and potentially other costs that were incurred as well. We were all a little nebulous about that. I'm wondering if you really have $10 million to spend. I would have guessed it was more like 8, but could you clarify that for me?
Carly or Chuck, would you refresh our memory? I thought UDOT had allocated around 10, of which 8 was for the parking structure, and then there was more for dispersed parking. But it seems like I've been under the impression that the whole allocation is up for renegotiation at this point, since we haven't really done anything yet.
Right, that's my understanding as well, which is about 10 was allocated by the legislature. So that's probably the cap. About 300,000 was spent on downtown parking structure design. UDOT has, it's my understanding that UDOT might be open to forgiving that. We might not have to pay it back, but it might mean that we're at like 9.7-ish. With, you know, originally it was 1.7 for dispersed and 8.3 for downtown parking structure. So I would say we're like at 9.5, unless UDOT wants to waive away completely the 300 to 500 that was spent on design already.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Okay, so just to sort of recap, I want to make sure that I'm following this accurately. What I've been hearing for the next meeting, folks want to see option B, that's you, Kaylin, focusing purely basically on parking. This is for dispersed or off Main Street, Emma, and this is the 9th Street stamp concrete. The works is what I'll call it. This is Wes's. Karen, you want to be sure that we understand better the cost for 8 streets rather than 9. And Jalen, I'm hearing stamp concrete for 7 streets with Emma included. It's like a modified option C.
Correct.
Okay. And I think the only one I haven't heard, and then Mike, you also spoke earlier. Yours was, I think it was option A that you were interested in, that you want us to include. I hope I'm understanding that. He talked about asphalt 7 streets, Emma. Is that right, Mike?
Yeah, that's what I was advocating for. Now they're looking at option B. You know, I can live with option B. I can come around to that.
Okay, do you want to keep option A in the mix, or are you with Kaylin on B?
I'm okay with B. I mean, I would guess it would be good for us all to come to a consensus. It's a compromise. I mean, if it were up to me, I would do a modified B with maybe more money for a pilot and a little less money for the trail and so forth. But I can compromise and let it stand the way Kaylin has presented it here. there's much we have yet to learn to run it by UDOT, so we'll see how that flies.
Okay. Okay, we can prepare these for the next meeting. And I'm sorry, I think I lost track of this. Do you want to meet again next week or in 2 weeks? What's the feeling?
I won't be here in 2 weeks, so
Next
I'd
week?
favor next week, but other than before Friday, but I also trust the group. Karen?
No, I was just gonna say that, and I know that Curtis and Evan are both gonna be back. And it would be good if they could kind of catch up to speed and weigh in. So
Right. You're not caught off guard when you have to like make a hard decision, right?
I mean, I'd rather, even if it's just briefly, that we check in with the group, just to do that formally would be great for next week.
I agree.
All right. I'll send out another doodle and we'll get that happening.
Okay. I can do next week. I know that. If it's on Wednesday, not on Tuesday.
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you all. Sorry that was a little painful, but it's very helpful to me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for pushing us to get that level of clarity that we want A, B, or C. Okay, so I'm wondering, is there a presentation on the possible transit concept? Is John going to present his proposal, or Karen, do you know?
I don't know, and I think Carly sent an invite out to him. I haven't heard anything.
I'm here, but I wasn't planning on presenting. I was just more responding to any questions y'all might have, but certainly go through that page and a half for if anybody's curious. Carly, I think put that in the packet that you all have. And Jeff and Robert are here from UDOT as well. So I was really planning on clarifying if there's anything that needs to be clarified versus a formal presentation.
Great, thank you for being here. Has anyone on the committee not had a chance to review the Moab Shuttle Transit Sketch Plan outline?
I have reviewed it. Thank you. Just this morning.
Great.
If I may, the purpose of this is with our internal discussions is really to, just like you're doing with your other elements here of the hotspots, is tee up a concept that the State Transportation Commission can go with. And so with transit, of course, it's normally this would be a 2 to 3 year process, and it's fairly substantial. A couple of 3 studies in terms of market demand and governance, who's going to run it, who's going to operate it, where's the long-term funding going to go. I think it's pretty clear the REC hotspots is a quite unique opportunity to bypass some of those more traditional startup efforts and leapfrog that, and I think backfill that later over time. And Jeff is welcome to weigh in on that, but backfill maybe some more formal, not requirements, but due diligence types of efforts after the fact or during the process of the pilot, assuming the pilot gets up and running. So that's the intent, is that we would help you all as a committee get some documentation, some what have you, a report that this committee would then take to the commission, and they would say, yes, let's move forward with this this part of the hotspots.
Great.
Yeah, that's well put, John. Sorry to interrupt. You know, we here in St. George, where I live, that they received some hotspot funds for a similar type thing. And for the last 2 years, we've been going through a number of negotiations for some of the things that John mentioned, like who's going to own it, what's the long-term funding source, and really spinning our wheels a lot for 2 years, but we've made a lot of headway. But that's not what we want to do here in Moab. I think we have a great chance to to really jumpstart this pilot project for transit. And then as it's operating, we've been talking for a while about doing a more in-depth transit planning effort. And I think that's where we would do, some of this real in-depth study about long-term funding program, who's going to own it, those types of things.
And by the way, on the project that Jeff's talking about in St. George, there were, not sure exactly how many when they first started, but even before Hotspots, I think there were possibly at least 3 studies on that transit studies on that corridor, roughly between Springdale, Hurricane, St. George area. So it takes some time typically.
So it looks like you would be generating this plan in what is very short order, but it's still not necessarily in the time frame in which this committee will be finalizing our recommendations. And so the main thing that I see us needing is to be confident in, or somewhat confident in a dollar amount that we're asking for. And I've heard 1.5 million for a pilot project. Do you think that's can you opine at this point whether you think that's the right number?
I'm going to kind of pivot off what Chuck was saying about contingency, if I could borrow some of his philosophy there. I think that's going to have to be a bit of a placeholder, to be honest. I think let's just say it's an assumption this would be outsourced. This would be a contract. It would be, 2 to 3 bidders would probably go after something like this. We can't predict what those bids would be in next spring, if it's as early as next spring. But just using industry standards for a system such as this, I think I would hope the commission and Jeff, Monty, and Robert would say, let's put a placeholder amount in there for about 1.5 when we're through with our concept report. And it would be a placeholder to move forward. I don't think we're going to get down to any more level. We could get down to some level, greater detail, and we can certainly insert that when we get a number. But today, I couldn't tell you anything more.
Okay, fair enough. Karen?
Yeah, I just would like to say that, this is a last minute that we, got the support from UDOT to actually look at this, and a lot of it had to do with the cost estimates that Chuck brought forth for our dispersed downtown parking, which is awesome. And the fact that it sounded like with the meeting that I was in that that John and his team would be able to potentially help us write up the RFP to send out to contractors. So even though we are bypassing a lot of the early studies, that doesn't mean that those aren't going to happen. Like Jeff mentioned, they would be happening probably in synchronous with the pilot program over the next few years. So, this is an amazing, an amazing opportunity to jump start and to have this initial funding to even make something like this happen. And it's a really unique situation. And I hope that we all see that. That doesn't mean it's done and gone. There's, a lot for us to work out between the county and the city. And so, there is the work, but having the concept to present to the commission will be substantial. So.
Yeah, John.
Yeah. So I think, we would take it to we would say we give you a sample RFP if it needed to be more refined, an actual RFP. It just makes me want to remind everybody that let's say we even have a sample RFP. Somebody has to own an RFP. Who are they going to respond to? Who's going to evaluate that? Who's going to? So I'm not saying these things can't be overcome by any stretch. I'm just giving you eyes wide open that even if you do an RFP, who's going to open it? Who's going to advertise it? Who's going to manage it once awarded? I think Jeff alluded to some of those things. That's a great opportunity. I agree. It just needs to be thought through beyond the commission hopefully saying yes.
Mhm.
And I'm sure you can do it. I'm just saying it needs to be thought through.
Well, thank you for your
And we're there to
comment.
help you as much as we can.
Mike,
Yeah, quick question for John and Jeff, real quickly. I'm a novice at this. You guys are the pros. I fully admit that, but I've been aware of everything from Uber and Lyft taxis on demand, possibly the city could own, small vans that are driven around town, on demand versus scheduled services, the classical giant diesel buses that run around. One unique thing we have here in Moab is during the high season, at particular times of days, on weekends and so forth, we're starting to see a lot of congestion all the way from the Colorado River Bridge all the way into town, either going into town or out of town. That's one thing that's really unique, and there is no way anytime soon in the near future to build a bypass. I would love to have an extra lane, for example, on the highway someplace that belonged just to transit, and I've seen other towns do that. I can't see that happening right now. But anyway, of all this stuff that I'm throwing out, on demand, take advantage of people's cell phones. Notice the fact that visitor traffic can be very dense certain times of the year and other times much more tractable, as well as residents taking advantage of transit system as well. So having thrown all that out, do you guys want to offer any thoughts about how you might, what kind of transit we're actually looking at here? I'm curious.
Jeff, I'll take a shot initially. I think you brought up some good points in terms of options. Aspen's doing a downtown, just an open air shuttle, so to speak, and some other communities have looked at that. It could be just circulated to the hotels. And by the way, I do agree with talking to the hotels in terms of a partnership that someone brought up earlier. But it could be a variety of things. I'm not personally envisioning big diesel buses chugging around town. So something a little more casual, certainly more user friendly. And I know noise and smells are very big issues in terms of exhaust, et cetera. So I think there's some technologies out there that would have, when it goes to an RFP, that could be spec'd out to the type of technology, the type of vehicles, the type of service. That's something we would help define in the RFP, is the type of service. But I don't envision anything very large, 60 passenger buses at this point. You do bring up a good point too, that I think you're hinting at too, is that nothing worse than being on a bus that's stuck in traffic too. And if that bus isn't comfortable. So will the bus be in the congestion on those peak times? Probably so, to be honest. And I think that needs to be again, part of the spirit of Eyes Wide Open. They're not going to magically bypass all the congestion without the infrastructure in place.
Yeah, I think, one of the purposes is that this is to help solve congestion. And so, different models of transit, some involve what's called demand response or dial-a-ride. I don't see that being used here, because I view that more as like a social service to help people that aren't able to drive. Whereas a fixed route that's operating up and down Main Street, I think on a consistent schedule is something that tourists and other folks that want to go up and down town are more likely to ride. But certainly I think we can vary that with the time of year. A lot of tourist-focused transit systems, and not necessarily just tourist-focused, but also provide transit rides for residents. They have different schedules for their buses depending on the time of year. There's a winter season, like in Colorado resort towns, where the buses are operating 20 hours a day. During the shoulder seasons, they go down, half that amount of service, and then start ramping up again for the summers. So I would think we'd have some sort of elements like that in our operations plan, just in response to the service demands.
And I want to pivot off, continue what Jeff said is too. I think one of a good market for maybe some longer distance travel is employee housing, workforce housing that may be a little bit more distant from the jobs in the downtown area or even the hotel district, hospitality district. So that can also be accounted for in some of the scheduling and service, the routing.
Well, thank you guys both so much. Those are great ideas. Thank you.
So I'm wondering what is needed from this committee to move forward. It seems like you're queued up, potentially ready to start work on this, but what sort of signal do you need from us or from city staff to proceed? Or I think that would be helpful to know. Karen,
I'm not sure. I don't have any good ideas right now. I know John is biting at the bit, just ready to get going. UDOT needs to figure out how to get a contract in place with Farron Piers so that they can start on this work. And I know that we're already taking steps to do that. So hopefully we can get going in 1 to 2 weeks. And at that point, John and his team will be able to come back to this group and report on their progress. And maybe just to add, I got here late, but it does sound like there was strong support from this committee to include this pilot project as potentially one of the projects. And we weren't really quite sure, a few days ago when we met offline. And so just knowing and hearing that confirmation that this is one of the priorities of the committee has been important.
Yep.
Okay, good. Karen, did you have something?
It was just to that I know that UDOT was looking to see that they did have the support from this committee, and I didn't want to speak for anybody, but that's why I reached out to Evan and to Curtis, which they both wrote in their support, but I know they were looking for that in order to move forward with the consultant's work. So.
And then I suppose there also at some point needs to be a discussion between city and county staff about, as John mentioned, there's going to be some work at our end. But it'll just be in the mix, I suppose.
Hey, Jaylyn, do you want to offer somebody up? It's been hard so far.
Okay. Offer somebody up to do what?
To be in on those discussions.
Oh yeah. So you're talking staff.
Yes.
Right now. I would say it would either be Mallory or Chris, the county council administrators. Either one of them would be great. I don't know whose plate is the most full right now. And I wanted to add that as far as property, where to put this, the most likely place, in my opinion, at this point in time is the arena. So I'm not committing to that, but I think it's certainly worth discussing.
So the arena managers should also be in on this potentially if we.
That's true. If it gets to that point, he absolutely should.
John?
Yeah, having spent a lot of time on Cane Creek on a previous study I did with you all, what about the city UDOT shops on Cane Creek? We have lots of guys with wrenches and oil, and this looks like some space there to park a couple of buses if possible. Is that off the table? I'm just curious. It's none of my business to some extent, at least right now. But it's just curious, is that off the table for any particular reason? It's right downtown. It's got a lot of infrastructure right there.
You're talking about the Public Works building down there?
Yeah.
We can definitely look into it. My understanding is it's used. It's not obvious how it's used. Like turning equipment around and that kind of stuff. So definitely examine it. It's worth looking at.
Yeah, it seemed like a good spot, but or a potential spot, I should say.
Yeah, thanks. It does seem like an obvious choice. Okay,
I mean, Kaylin, I'll add one more thing. I don't know, Bill Jackson is very knowledgeable about transportation and roads and that kind of stuff. He might be another possibility.
for the, are you thinking of the county roadshed as a,
No, just as someone to offer input and ideas and that kind of thing.
all right. Well, if there's no further questions or discussion, thank you, John.
Sure.
Jeff, for being here. I'm excited about this late-breaking opportunity. And Carly, are you aware of needing anything else from the committee at this time?
Good to go.
Okay. In that case, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I
I
so
so
moved.
move.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Kaylin, for
Second
being.
by Karen.
Thank you, Kaylin. Great job.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Bye.
Thanks, John and Jeff.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.